The 2020 NFL Draft wide receiver group is being touted as one of the most talented and exciting classes in the history of the NFL Draft. Over the last decade, we've seen 311 receivers drafted, and on average, 3 are selected in the first round. The 2015 draft holds the record with 6 receivers selected in the first round, but most consider the 2014 draft class to be the best of all time. After evaluating the 2020 class, I believe it has the potential to challenge the record for receivers drafted in the first round. We could potentially see up to 7 selected on day 1. Being such a deep class and talented class, it could also potentially rival the 2014 group as one of the best ever. I have broken the top 15 receivers in this class into 4 tiers. There are some very talented players outside the top 15 that I think will have an impact on their future teams. That's what makes this class so special, but at this stage I made the tough decision to narrow it down to 15. My 4th tier is a group of players that are going to need time to develop and be in the right systems to find longevity in the NFL. They've shown flashes of promise, but are going to need time to work on specific areas of their game to ultimately find consistent time on the field. Moving to my 3rd tier consists of players that have more of a boom or bust element to them. Some of them will play from day 1, some of them will need more time, but at this time they're not as polished as the lower tier players. In my 2nd tier, it's a group that will start from day 1, but either don't have quite as high as ceilings as the tier 1 players, or maybe a little bit lower floor. Nonetheless, it's a group that I expect to compete from day 1, and they all have a shot to go in the first round. And finally, my top tier. These are my tier 1 prospects. This is an incredibly special group of players that I think will have an immediate impact on their new teams. I'd expect these guys to be drafted in the first half of the first round. It's a group that I feel is ready-made for the NFL, and they can be a wide receiver 1 from day 1. While I fully expect this class to be dominant, it's really important to remember how difficult it is to predict a prospect and what that prospect will do. A vast majority of the success of these players will be held within their own hands, but there is a lot that can affect a prospect, such as injuries or a poor fit with a team or within a systems. Sometimes for a prospect, it takes a few different stops in their career to ultimately find their best fit. With this group, they're incredibly talented and special, but it may be the case with some of them. So with that, I appreciate everyone spending some time today. Let's get started. Let's start in Tier 4. To start Tier 4 and coming in at number 15, I have the big physical prospect Chase Claypool from Notre Dame. While watching Claypool's film, it's hard to ignore his size and speed. Claypool comes in at 6'4", 240 pounds, and blew away the combine by running a 4.4 240 and showing off a 40.5-inch vertical leap. Claypool's biggest strength is his size and his speed, which he used to his advantage at Notre Dame. He's excellent at using his large frame to box out smaller defenders and has a very big catch radius. He runs decent routes at all 3 levels and presents matchup nightmares for smaller defensive backs and slower box players. He's more of a long sprinter rather than a short burst player. When he gets going though, he's very tough to slow down, but struggles to make players miss in space. He's at his best when he's getting to the sticks on 3rd and short to medium distances, and when he gets free releases going down the field. Claypool struggles at the top of his routes and is often slow getting in and out of his breaks. He has a tendency to drift at the top of his routes, which limits his separation at times. He's not the most natural pass catcher, and despite his size, he lets the ball get into his body often. In the run game, Claypool tends to run to spots rather than breaking down and reading where the defender is going. When he does engage with the defenders, he's incredibly physical, but often on film, defensive backs slip by Claypool with a quick change of direction. I think scouts may be more wowed by Claypool the physical prospect rather than Claypool the actual player. My player comparison is Jonathan Baldwin from Pittsburgh, who was drafted in the first round of the 2011 draft. Similar to Claypool, Baldwin had a unique combination of size and speed, which shot him into the first round, but he could never put it all together to maintain an NFL career. I believe Claypool can be a strong third option in the right offense, being a mismatch on nickel corners. I project him to be drafted in the 3rd round, even if it's just for his sheer physical talents alone. Coming in at number 14 is Donovan Peoples-Jones from Michigan. While the former 5-star recruit may not have lived up to the hype and underwhelmed in the maize and blue, I still feel Peoples-Jones can have a solid NFL career. Based off his physical tools alone, there's still a high ceiling for him, but at the same time I do think there's a very low floor. He has shown over his career to have a versatile skill set, but the lack of production is a major concern for me. Peoples-Jones has very strong hands and can make just about every catch thrown his way. He does a good job of tracking the football, and he uses excellent body control to adjust accordingly to make some of the most difficult catches you can make. He does a great job at the top of his routes getting in and out and coming back down to the football. Despite running a 4.48 40 at the combine, he does not pose much of a deep threat, but he does high point the football well when the ball is placed right on top of his helmet. He does not always look for contact in the run game, but can use his size to his advantage when he is playing inside to seal off defenders. While part of his lack of production can be attributed to poor quarterback play, to never have posted more than 90 yards in a single game of his 3-year career raises great concerns for me. Peoples-Jones is at his best when he's playing inside and does not have press coverage on him. He shows instances of very quick feet on his releases, but is far too inconsistent and allows press corners to stay engaged for too long. It seemed like Michigan's quarterbacks were always on the run, but Peoples-Jones can be slow to get into his routes, and defenders tend to run stride for stride with him in a lot of his route. My player comparison is Devontae Parker, who was drafted in the first round in the 2015 draft out of Louisville. They have a very similar build, and their college films tend to mirror each other often. Like Parker, who finally broke out this year with the Dolphins after a few years of struggling, I think Peoples-Jones is going to take some time to develop. I would draft him in the 3rd round with the upside he has shown, but also be wary of the low floor as his game is going to require time to develop, and he's going to need to build off of his physical attributes. He should make a really nice project for a team that already has depth at wide receiver. At number 13, I have Bryan Edwards, the big receiver out of South Carolina. Edwards was a highly productive player in all 4 of his seasons at South Carolina, racking up 235 career receptions and just over 3,000 career yards. Edwards leaves South Carolina with the most career receptions and the most career yards, surpassing former Gamecock Alshon Jeffrey. Like a number of prospects in this draft, he has great size at 6'3" and a solid frame weighing 215 pounds. Edwards' strength comes in the short to intermediate passing game as he struggles to adjust in the vertical passing game and allows defenders to stay in his hip pocket. He possesses above average speed and matched with his size allowed him to create mismatches across the field. I would like to see Edwards use his physicality more as he gets stuck at the line of scrimmage with bigger physical corners. I believe that can pose a big issue for Edwards, and he'll likely have to be moved to the inside to maximize his production on the next level. While Edwards displayed a bevy of circus catches, he can get lazy and allow some easy ones to get away from him. From time to time, a lack of concentration can result in a tendency to have his eyes drift more towards the defender rather than staying on the football. My player comparison for Edwards is Rueben Randall, who was drafted in the 2nd round in the 2012 draft out of LSU. Like Randall, Edwards battled and matched up against some of the top corners every week in the SEC and showed very consistent play. Edwards has had some injury history that forced him to miss some games in his career, but assuming he can stay healthy and on the fields, I do believe Edwards has a chance to be as high as a wide receiver too if he can shore up some of his deficiencies. At 12, I have the extremely productive Tyler Johnson out of Minnesota. In his 4 years with the Gophers, all Johnson did was catch 213 passes, have 3,305 yards, and haul in 33 touchdowns. As of right now, Johnson would be my steal of this group based off where he's projected to be drafted. I have Johnson at the 12th spot because I do not believe he has the massive upside potential of some of the other prospects, but there is a need for a player with his skill set on every team. I believe he has a high floor and has showed he is a quarterback's best friend with his consistency and reliability on all downs. He runs very precise routes and has a well-refined route tree. He typically wins with fundamentals and has soft hands you like to see. Johnson can be physical and muscle defenders when he's going for contested catches. Johnson needs to rely on being a craftier route runner, and he's not the fastest or most quick-twitched as you'd like to see in the NFL. Man coverage can present more problems for Johnson, especially when he's playing against more athletic defensive backs, which will be the norm for him on the next level. He finds soft spots in the zone well, but takes a little longer to turn and get back upfield. In the run game, he's a strong stalk blocker and efficient at the point of attack. For being a bigger receiver, you would like to see some more punishing finishes, but he holds his ground well, allowing for big run plays to develop. My player comparison is a throwback from the 2004 draft in the 4th round at North Carolina State, Jericho Cotchery. With near identical college production and physical attributes, Cotchery was never a Pro Bowler but was a key contributor on multiple playoff teams in his career. They both win with their toughness, precise route running, and reliability, particularly on 3rd down. Like Cotchery, I think Johnson will be drafted in the 4th round because he is being overlooked by some of his physical limitations, but he can have a lasting impact on an organization for a long time. Moving into the 3rd tier now, and to kick off the 3rd tier, at number 11 I have the playmaker out of TCU, Jalen Reagor. Anytime Reagor has the ball in his hands, it is must-watch TV as he's always a threat to take it to the house. He's a human highlight reel that you could watch on endless repeat and find a new play to be wowed about. Reagor is a playmaker both on offense and also on special teams, which certainly adds to his versatility. On offense, it will be imperative for him to be in a creative offense that can get the ball into his hands through a variety of different ways other than just pass catching. He's extremely quick-twitched and has blazing track speed, which translates well on the football field. He's deadly in the 3-step passing game and can also get behind safety as well, with a quick and fluid stick move. Rager does a nice job at the top of his routes creating separation in the limited routes that he ran in college. My concerns with Rager is his very limited route tree has been tough for previous players coming out of similar offenses to overcome. He runs the limited routes he knows well, but is far from a great route runner as a whole. He used his speed and quickness to his advantage at TCU, but that will only get you so far in the NFL when everyone on the field is fast. His hands also leave a lot to be desired, and his arms can tend to get very short going across the middle. He does not particularly like contact in the run game either, which concerns me in any prospect. My player comparison is Percy Harvin, who was drafted in the first round out of Florida in the 2009 draft. Harvin was at his best when he was in a creative offense that allowed him to get the ball in his hands through numerous different ways. In Harvin's best season, he had 87 receptions, 54 rushes, and 16 kick returns, where his explosiveness was seen in multiple phases of the game. I believe Rager is going to need to find himself in the right position to reach his max potential on the next level. He's limited as a wide receiver as a whole, which is why I'm lower on him than most, but can be a game changer when properly involved, which I hope to see next season. I'd expect to see Rager go in the second round, off his sheer playmaking ability alone, but I still have concerns in multiple aspects of his game as a receiver, which I think will prevent him from becoming a true wide receiver 1. Finally cracking into the top 10, I have the tall and athletic receiver T. Higgins out of Clemson. He has become somewhat of a household name after finding himself on some of the biggest and brightest stages during his career with the Tigers. I believe playing in so many high-profile games, it has contributed to him being ranked higher by many others than I have him. Higgins is a tall 6 foot 4 inches with 34-inch arms and uses his height and length to his advantage. Higgins does not bring a lot of wiggle to his game, nor does he have great top-end speed, but he's a long strider who excels at catching jump balls at their apex. He's a 50-50 ball monster who can rip the ball away like a rebounder, and it makes him highly efficient in the red zone. At Clemson, he was limited in his route tree, but he has shown enough athleticism and fundamentals that I think he should be able to run more patterns than just his vertical routes. I have Higgins lower ranked than most others because he's not much more than a one-trick pony in the offense he ran at Clemson. His size and length are great, but I have big concerns with his speed, and I don't think he has multiple gears to be a factor in the catch and run game at the next level. Playing with a generational college quarterback, I believe, helped him elevate his game to an extent, which helped his overall production. Higgins, for being a bigger receiver, also can struggle with physical corners. He's not an overly aggressive blocker, but does enough to get in the way to create some seams down the field for running backs. My player comparison is Courtland Sutton, who was drafted in the second round out of SMU. They both have similar build and a lot of the same questions coming out of college. Sutton burst onto the scene this past season and really used his size and length to his advantage, becoming a big play receiver for the Broncos. I believe Higgins can have the same impact on the team because he has strong fundamentals and you can't teach size. He's going to be a red zone dream for any quarterback that he gets to play with at the next level. I believe Higgins will be drafted in the second round with the potential to sneak into the first round. At 9, I have the Swiss Army knife do-it-all prospect out of Colorado, Laviska Shenault. When I first watched Chenault's tape, I thought I was watching a running back in the open field. Then I saw him playing quarterback and running the Wildcat. Then I watched him dominate as a receiver. He is truly the most perplexing prospect I broke down because I think he has the largest variance from ceiling to floor of any of the other prospects. He's another prospect that has a rare combination of size, speed, and strength with great athleticism. He runs great deep routes and has excellent body control when tracking the balls in the air. He's an absolute bully with the ball in his hands, and he earns every yard after catch. He can play inside or outside and can beat defenders with speed or strength off the line of scrimmage. He runs fairly crisp routes, although he can be slightly inconsistent. He doesn't always come back downhill out of breaks, tends to round the top of some of his patterns, and can drift downfield when looking back at the quarterback. His injury history is a major concern for me, and that alone would be enough to scare me away as a GM. But if you put that to the side, I do not see Shenault as a truly natural receiver, due in part that he was probably asked to do too much in college and never truly focused just on playing receiver. His versatility, which is such a great strength of his, could also be detrimental with his high risk of injury by being asked to do too much. He's another guy who's going to need to be put into a creative offense to maximize his success. I also like his aggressiveness in the run game, and he loves to beat up on defensive backs. My player comparison, which was the furthest stretch I had to find so far in this group, is Anquan Boldin, who was drafted in the second round out of Florida State. Boldin was a quarterback in college and had to switch to receiver going into the NFL. While Shenault isn't exactly switching positions, he's going to need to focus on becoming a more natural receiver to excel. Much like Boldin, he's a downhill runner who is bruising to take down in the open field. I think Shenault is an enticing prospect with his size and do-it-all versatility, but the injury history will likely knock him into the second round of this year's draft. At number 8, I have the burner out of Penn State, KJ Hamler. If football doesn't work out, he will always have a fallback plan as a world-class sprinter. Hamler is arguably the most electric receiver in this class and is a nightmare to tackle in the open field. He has great field vision with the ball in his hands and would be hard to tackle in a phone booth. He's elite at making defenders miss in the tightest of spaces. His ability to stop on a dime and change direction is better than anyone else in this class. He utilizes that in his routes to push defenders deep and come back to the football. He does a great job of sinking his hips and accelerating out of his routes. He prefers to play outside the numbers, but can efficiently run routes at all three levels. His speed alone creates cushion for him, which allows him to run underneath and away from defenders. He can be utilized in the run game in a variety of jet sweep packages. Hamler is going to need to put on size to endure the physicality of the NFL game, week in and week out. He's not overly physical in his game at all, as he relies on speed for everything that he does. He can get bounced around the middle when running crossing routes, and his arms can be a little short when making contested catches over the middle. Drops continue to be an issue for this past year for Hamler. He can make every catch, but seems to have concentration drops on plays that he had already made prior in the game. He does not have a very large catch radius and needs to be hit in stride to be most dangerous. Hamler almost exclusively has to play in the slot and will need to be put into motion to gain the most free releases, which puts him at his strength. In the run game, he gets tossed around and tries to avoid getting mixed in with the big boys, mostly because of his smaller stature. My player comparison is Tavon Austin, who was drafted in the first round out of West Virginia in 2013. Hamler may not have quite the highlight tape that Austin boasted coming out of college. They profile out very similarly from a size and speed standpoint. They played in different offenses in college, so Hamler didn't put up the insane numbers that Austin did, but their skill sets run parallel with one another. They are at their best in the open field and making defenders miss. I believe Hamler will be drafted in the second round and will make a nice complementary receiver for a team that already has a big number 1 receiver. Moving into tier 2 and coming in at number 7, I have the playmaker from Arizona State, Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk was a JUCO transfer to Arizona State and made the most of his 2 seasons at ASU. He was highly productive on both offense and special teams and took the role on as the number 1 receiver for the Sun Devils very well. Ayuk can play both inside and outside, although he's likely better suited to play inside off the ball in the NFL. He really excels in the short passing game, and a majority of his yards are from the run after catch. He's another guy who's very tough to bring down in the open field, has good breakaway speed, and is a playmaker anytime he has the ball in his hands. He has very good field vision when getting upfield and has quick cutbacks that often lead from routine plays turning into long touchdowns. He wasn't asked to run a lot of intermediate routes in college and does struggle to find the soft spots in the zone coverages on a lot of these routes. He is a deep threat that stems defenders well and is quick on the vertical breaking routes, but he doesn't always sink his hips well on routes coming back to the line of scrimmage. Ayuk does a nice job of pressing the corner's outside shoulders and slipping under to get vertical, but he's going to need to add more releases to his games. He relies on that release way too much. He needs to work on hand fighting at the line of scrimmage, as he can get stuck by corners that engage with him quickly at the snap. He brings a lot of toughness to the position and is still developing, as he only played 2 years at ASU. Ayuk is a strong blocker and isn't afraid to get mixed up and tangle with defenders. My player comparison is Marquise Lee, who was drafted in the second round out of USC in the 2014 draft. Like Lee, Ayuk did not blow away the combine and ran a 4.5 40, but on tape plays much faster than that time. He can be a threat to score on any down and can contribute to the passing game, running game, and special teams as well. Ayuk is still learning the position and has a high floor with his level of play already, but I feel he's just scratching the surface as to what he can do. I would expect Ayuk to be drafted in the first round and can be a starter from day 1 on any NFL team. At number 6, I have the deceptive Michael Pittman out of USC. For one reason or another, Pittman has fallen outside the top 10 of receiver prospects in this draft for a number of analysts, but I am much higher on him than that. Pittman has really short hands and a large catch radius that allows him to bring in all passes within reasonable range. He is tall and long, coming in at 6'4", and he goes up and attacks the football very well. He does lack ideal top-end speed and isn't the most quick twitch, but is deceptively fast and can flip defensive backs' hips with the best of them. He is a sharp route runner and makes adjustments to coverages seamlessly on the fly. He is very fundamental in his game, which makes up for some of his athletic shortcomings. He knows how to play the game well and is as tough as they come at wide receiver. He has a great feel for zone coverage and can stack corners very well in man on his vertical routes. He possesses a lot of intangibles and is an extremely high IQ player, which cannot be taught. While I love the reliability and fundamentals of Pittman's game, he's going to need to continue to be savvy and creative in his game, as he lacks that top-end foot speed. He's another guy who struggles at the line of scrimmage against physical corners. He's not quick enough to play inside, and he needs to be more physical on the outside, which makes him a tweener. All in all, with his high IQ and fundamentals, I believe Pittman has what it takes to be a quality NFL starter. My player comparison is Michael Thomas, who was drafted in the second round out of Ohio State. Like Thomas, Pittman is long and sure-handed and can be a quarterback's best friend. They may not possess the game-changing highlight reel play, but are very steady. I see a lot of similarities and a lot of the knocks that are on Pittman that were there for Thomas that pushed him into the second round. If Pittman can continue to build on his fundamentals and use his size and IQ, he will be a number one receiver in the NFL. He will likely be drafted in the second round, but his production for years to come will be a first round worthy. At number 5, I have the reliable Justin Jefferson at LSU. Coming off a historic campaign and national championship victory, Jefferson led the nation with 111 receptions. While some of his production is a byproduct of a revamped offense led by projected number 1 pick Joe Burrow, he built off a very nice 2018 campaign. He is a true quarterback's best friend and runs very consistent routes and works to find the open grass on every play. He is not a dynamic athlete, but solidified his case by running a 4.43 40 at the combine. Jefferson has good size, strong hands, and he is a diversified route running machine. He can carve up a zone as his secondary releases are smooth downfield, and he works back to the ball well and finds soft spots in the zone. He doesn't let defenders get hands on him downfield, although they can run stride for stride with him at times. Against man, he sets defenders up well and has quick eyes and hands tracking the ball right out of his breaks. He is fearless going across the middle and does well using his body on contested catches. Jefferson can struggle on 50-50 balls when he cannot get behind the secondary and needs to work on using his strength to box out smaller defenders on those throws. I'd like to see him work on his vertical receiving game more, but some of that may be hard with his average speed. He will need to be creative and work tirelessly to set up defenders to add that element to his game. I love Jefferson's floor and I think he's going to be a pass-catching machine at the next level. My player comparison is Stefon Diggs, who was drafted in the 4th round out of Maryland. I like this player comp because coming out of Maryland, Diggs had a very similar game and profile to Jefferson, and in the last few years has become a deep threat as well. Diggs is a route running technician and learned to use that to his advantage to set up corners and safeties to take the top off defenses. I believe Jefferson has that floor of Diggs, and if he can add that to his game as well, he'll be a Pro Bowler in no time. I expect him to be drafted in the 1st round and have an impact on day 1. Rounding out the second tier, and at number 4, I have Denzel Mims out of Baylor. Every year there's a player that has a meteoric rise up draft boards after the combine, and this year Mims helped himself more than any other receiver. Having said that, I believe Mims also has the tape and skills to back up the justification of him moving so high up draft boards. Mims is a receiver that was created in a lab. He's 6'3", 210 pounds, runs a 4.38 40, has a 38.5-inch vertical, and also a 131-inch broad jump. He's a big and physical presence that knows how to use his size and speed to his advantage. As you watch his film, you are continuously wowed by the things that he can do on the field. He has a massive catch radius, he can go up in high point footballs, he has long strides to fly past defenders, and he has really good hands as well. Mims is a monster in the red zone, where his game excels the most by setting up defenders. He either uses his size and jumping ability on the quick fades, or sells vertical and slips underneath to walk in on slants. He does not have the most refined route tree as a product of his college offense, and it shows at times when he's not running one of his staples. He can get sloppy at the top of his routes, and sometimes tries to win with speed rather than technique. He is a willing blocker, but is also very inconsistent. His floor is a little lower than the tier 1 players I have, but I love his ceiling just as much. My player comparison is Dez Bryant, who was a 1st round pick out of Oklahoma State in 2010. Bryant was a little more refined than Mims coming out of college, but nonetheless they are built similarly and have a very similar style of play. If Mims can learn from Dez and shore up some of the fundamentals in his game, particularly releases, he will have an outstanding career. I'm not sure if Mims will have quite the career Bryant had, but if he can come close, this 1st round draft pick will make a franchise very happy. And finally, moving into my top tier, Tier 1, to lead us off at number 3, I have Henry Ruggs, the burner out of Alabama. Just like KJ Hamler, I'm not sure if Ruggs chose the right career because he could be the anchor leg of the U.S. Olympic 4x100 team. Ruggs ran a 4.27 40 at the combine, but speed's not the end-all be-all to his games. Ruggs is a polished route runner who does not fear going across the middle. His speed is deadly in that Ruggs scored on 25% of his catches in college and averaged 17.5 yards per catch. He does an outstanding job of setting defenders up on double moves and accelerating at a cuts to create space. He is almost impossible to cover one-on-one without help over the top, which takes pressure off his other receivers. He does a nice job of keeping his shoulder profile downfield until the last second. He has soft hands and makes all routine plays smoothly. He's a threat to take every slant the distance with his game-breaking speed. He can struggle at times with physicality and getting knocked off routes with physical corners. His limited size prevents him from winning 50-50 balls and contested catches at this point. On releases, he only used speed releases, which have worked very well for him so far, but that could potentially pose problems at the next level. My boldest prediction of this group is that Ruggs is actually the first receiver selected in this year's draft. My player comparison is Tyreek Hill, who was drafted in the 5th round out of West Alabama in 2016. I actually feel while this seems to be the most accurate comparison from a playing style standpoint, it is a little bit of a lazy comparison. At this point in Ruggs' career, he is far more polished as a receiver than Hill was. They both have 4.2 speed and are smaller in stature, but Ruggs is a more refined route runner and a better overall football player. Will he reach Tyreek's potential? I think so, but nonetheless, Ruggs will be an elite player in the NFL. At number 2, and I'd make no complaints about him at number 1, is CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma. The 6'2", 200-pound prospect for the Sooners has had one of the great receiving careers in college football history. He's a dynamic playmaker that averaged an incredible 21.4 yards per catch last season. He can win at all 3 levels and is a matchup nightmare for every defensive coordinator. He has exceptional ball skills and does an excellent job of tracking the football. He has elite body control and athleticism that he displays in all aspects of his game. He's a very good route runner and can set up corners with strong sticks and head fakes. He sinks his hips nicely going in and out of patterns, although he does have some room for acceleration coming out of them. Playing with the ball in his hands is the best part of his game. He has tremendous balance and vision and is always moving north. Despite not having elite speed, he's a big play threat every time he touches the football. He's incredibly versatile and can play all 3 receiver positions well and can line up anywhere on the field. Lamb has great concentration and uses his eyes as much as his hands when catching footballs. While you wish he had 4.3 speed to make him near a perfect prospect, he still seems to be the fastest player on the field when he's out there. He did not face a lot of press coverage in college, and that will be an area that he'll need to get familiar with as his game progresses. My player comparison is DeAndre Hopkins, who was drafted in the 1st round out of Clemson in the 2014 draft. You can find yourself spending hours watching Lamb's film because he was involved on every play in Oklahoma's offense. Like Hopkins, I expect to see Lamb be a number 1 receiver from the second he steps on the NFL field. He has supreme talent, skill, and will ultimately be a perennial Pro Bowler in the NFL. He can make any quarterback look good, and he's as solid as they come for a 1st-round draft pick. And finally, at number 1, I have the superstar out of Alabama, Jerry Jeudy. Seems like Jerry Jeudy has been in the national spotlight since day 1, and all he's done is consistently deliver during that time. Jeudy comes out of Tuscaloosa as one of the most refined and polished receivers we have ever seen. He is not perfect, but has an advanced skill set mature beyond his years. It all starts with his ability to create separation, and he's a surgeon with how precise his routes are. He has an extensive route tree, and there is no route that he cannot handle. He does a great job of eating up space and getting defensive backs on their heels. He keeps his eyes, shoulders, chest, and hips straight downfield as he stands up defensive backs. He can cut on a dime to get in and out of his breaks, which allows him to create separations versus faster corners. He has very good top-end speed, which allows him to win on all 3 levels. While his route running is the best part of his game, he also excels at running after the catch. His ability to break away from the pack is elite and can also make defenders miss in tight spaces. Jeudy does a nice job finding soft spots in zone and settling in behind defenders. He's exceptional at coming back to the ball and accelerating back up the field after the catch. While no prospect is perfect, Jeudy seemed to catch a case of the drops this year. They seem to be more concentration drops because we have seen him make every catch on the field. Jeudy is a serviceable stalk blocker and seems to be involved downfield making blocks on a majority of Alabama's big plays. I'd like to see Jeudy become a little more fluid, as he sometimes is too fundamental if there's such a thing. He needs to continue to work on his releases and shore up the easy drop passes. My player comparison is Odell Beckham Jr., who was drafted in the 1st round out of LSU. Another surgical route runner who is dynamic with the ball in his hands. Beckham may be a little more quick twitch than Jeudy, but the way that they get defensive backs spinning in their routes is very comparable. I'm not sure if Jeudy will be the first wide receiver off the board, but if it were my choice, he would be my pick. I absolutely love how polished he is and how high his floor is, but he also has an incredibly high ceiling as well. I expect Jeudy to be making big plays from day 1, and he's my number 1 wide receiver in the 2020 NFL Draft class.